Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our Data Plus Women Zurich event. I'm very excited for the speakers that we have today. And not only because you will hear like a beautiful French accent too. So what is Data Plus Women? It's a networking group for women working with or around data. Of course, men are welcome to join. Absolutely no problem. But our speakers are only female, except some exception. So our goal is really to promote and celebrate the achievements and success of women in that field. If you are interested to speak, you can scan the QR code or contact Olivia or myself directly in LinkedIn. We will be happy to have you on stage. Yes, I just put like random picture. Olivia started putting some pictures of some of the event, and because it was only me most of the picture, I decided that on the last minute I will put like some picture on top to make her laugh. So that is Data Plus Women. We had like some physical event and some also virtual event. It's a little mix when we could have a room with of course personal, but usually it's more fun to do it virtual. You have a larger audience and better speakers, like a wider speaker, let's say. So my name is Annabelle Rincon. I forgot always that to introduce myself at the beginning. I am leading the Tableau Center of Enablement for a Swiss bank, and I have the chance to have been named visionary and ambassador for Tableau. But Data Plus Women is not about Tableau, it's about data and women. If you want to join my Analytic Tableau user group, you have the QR code. And if you want again to join Data Plus Women, you also have the QR code if you arrive here by chance through LinkedIn. So, and Olivia is a data scientist at Meta. Passion are surfing, ski touring, and books. And she's often traveling all around the world, which is quite fun when she told us where she's joining. And she's my irreplaceable colleague on the Data Plus Women. So thank you, Olivia. And then now Olivia will speak and I will rest for the rest of the event, just monitoring the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. And yeah, as you already know, my name is Olivia. So hello to everyone, or good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining from. We have an international audience. So again, thank you for the nice introduction, Annabelle. I have the honor to introduce our speakers here and the topic that we're going to talk about today. And essentially, Anne-Sophie and Sarah will talk about their dataviz collaboration. They co-published a visualization called the TED Lasso Pop Culture References, and it was recognized as the Viz of the Day in March 23 of this year. So they will share their learnings and they will give us an advice how to maybe create the next Viz of the Day in the upcoming month. So before we start and before I hand over to our speakers, a few words about our honored guest today. So we have Anne-Sophie. She is London-based, that's what I heard, and she's a data analyst at LinkedIn. What is most interesting is that she analyzes music or the Eurovision Song Contest. So I'm curious to hear more about it. Maybe she will tell us something about it. Yeah, and as already being said, Ted Lasso was one of her work that was honored as the Viz of the Day, and it was her third one. And then we have Sarah. Sarah is located in Canada, so that's why she also said good morning to us. She's originally from Canada. Sorry, so you're in California. And Sarah works as an analytics consultant and was co-working on the TED Lasso project that was again recognized as the dataviz, and what we will hear about today. So with that, I don't even want to say more. I'm super curious to hear what you're going to show us and what advice you will give us. So, with that, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Thank you very much, Annabelle, for inviting us and for this introduction. I am going to make an attempt at sharing my screen. Let's see how it works. Bear with me. Right now, you should see a lovely wallpaper. And after that, maybe even a PowerPoint. Who knows? Use presenter view. I unfortunately can't see you at all anymore. So I'm just going to assume that until somebody interrupts me, that means that you can see the slides and you can hear me. So hi, everyone. I think like we've covered a lot during the introduction, but Sarah and I are going to talk you through our collaboration on a passion project, which, as had been said, was around Ted Lasso and his pop culture references. And the idea, how it started, is that we've noticed while watching this TV series that the main character of the show, called obviously Ted Lasso, expresses himself through a lot of pop culture references. That's his way of communicating with others. And we wanted to explore it. We wanted to give people tools to explore themselves, like the different references, but also provide a fully fledged analysis on the main points that our main findings when we deep dived into those references. So this is a viz which is part analysis, part exploratory, where we've highlighted some highlights, but we also let people find more about like the subtopics that they are more interested in. And as Olivia said, this viz was recognized in March 23 as Viz of the Day. And more recently in September, it was longlisted in the Information is Beautiful Awards in the Arts, Entertainment and Culture category. That's to give you a bit of context about the project itself. I do realize that I did not introduce ourselves at all, and that was very rude of me, but thank God I'm working with a Canadian woman. So I'm just going to let the stereotypes talk and say that she's much nicer than me. So take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. So Olivia already did such a lovely introduction about who we are. As you know, Anne-Sophie's based in London and I am based in Los Angeles. Here's a fun fact about us. We have never met in person. And we were connected originally through Nicole Klassen's Viz Collab program, which is, if you're not familiar with it, you can put your name in and she will connect you with a data visualization collaborator so that you can complete a project together. And so that's how we were introduced. And thinking about Anne-Sophie being in London and me being in Los Angeles, you're probably wondering, how did we make this collaboration work? We've never met. We're in completely different time zones. And the beautiful thing about that is that we actually made that time zone difference work for us, because when it's my day, it's Anne-Sophie's evening or night. And when it's my night, it's her day. And so when it came time to sharing one workbook, it was quite easy because I would be online working on it. Then I'd send it over to her and I would go to bed and then she would wake up and work on it. And so it was a really lovely process. And we really made that our time zone differences work for us. And we're just so thrilled to share this with you today because this Ted Lasso Viz is a tangible product of women in data connecting and lifting each other up. And it's just such a wonderful opportunity for us to be here with you today. So I've already talked about the time zones. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the collaboration tool we've used. So Zoom was our number one go-to tool for connecting. We set up calls, and this cadence was really helpful to us to keep the project on track. It kept us accountable to each other and also to ourselves. And it really helped facilitate brainstorming and idea generation, especially as we got into the later stages of development. And as you can see here, it's morning time for me and it's evening time for Anne-Sophie, and toward the end of the project, we were so in sync that we would show up on these Zoom calls, both wearing stripes, coincidentally. So we had a lot of fun with that. We also used Google Drive. That was the method for us to share our documentation, our tracking spreadsheet, and our data source is a Google spreadsheet, and we use the Google Drive, the connectors in Tableau Desktop that they offer. We actually set up a Ted Lasso dedicated Google Drive with a shared password, because that ultimately ended up being the best way for us to share those files. And last but not least, Tableau Public was our go-to for sharing the workbook. While it was in development, we would publish the workbook to Tableau Public and use their hidden viz feature. This is a gem. If you're not familiar with this, when you publish a viz, you can hide it from your profile. So it's not visible to the public. It's only visible to those that you share that link with. So I would publish the latest version I was working on, send the link. I would hide it on Tableau Public, send the link to Anne-Sophie. She'd be able to access it, view it, download it, and then she could do the same for me. So definitely make use of that feature on Tableau Public if you haven't already. Next, I'm going to turn the floor back over to Anne-Sophie so that she can walk us through the process.
So, you know, all those memes about like the difference between reality and expectations. I think this applies a lot to dataviz projects, like whether they're professionals or like passion projects. But I want to walk you through like what naively we envisaged the process was going to be. So first thing is we didn't know each other, Sarah and I, as we discussed already. So we didn't even know if we had like topics in common, like something that would be of interest. So but okay, we're probably going to need a bit of time to know each other, to find like, the Venn diagram, the perfect topic that, suits both of us. Then, I don't know, we will probably have to find the data online, find a data source or something. Well, we're not naive. Like this is not our first rodeo. We know we're going to have a bit of data cleaning to do. I know this is not like the most glamorous part, but we all know that this is actually a big part of being a data analyst. After that, like obviously we're going to have to massage the data to get some insights. The fun part is obviously the sketching part, like the visual exploration, like finding like the right chart, like the right, that brings the best compelling message. And at the end, like we just spend a little time doing, with the bells and whistles, that just we're working on the interactivity and stuff like that. And probably like if we spend the equal amount of time on each section, I mean, that project would take us, 6 months, which is, quite good for collaboration. And this is what happened in reality. It took us, and I'm not joking, 3 minutes to find a topic, which is a bit insane. The data collection was actually not that bad, even though it was absolutely manual. And Sarah will walk you through that part. But by that stage, we were feeling, personally, I was feeling very smug about this, because I was just, yes, we are nailing this. And then, the cleaning started to happen. And oh boy, Sarah will explain to you, it was a bit longer than we thought. The analysis, that started to get messy. Like, as you can see, we're no longer sequential, like things are happening in parallel. Then the exploration, even more things in parallel. And then, the design and interactivity took us forever. What it seemed forever. It took us all in all 10 months instead of the 6 months that we envisaged at the beginning of the process. Now, the reason why I'm telling you all this is the following. For us, the key takeaways is, first off, don't be frustrated if the process is not as linear as you think. If the phases go in parallel at the same time, it's absolutely fine. The second thing is that for any passion project, a project which is not aligned with a client deadline, you need to come up with your own deadline, because otherwise, Sarah and I could probably have still been working on this project even today. And we had decided on a soft deadline, which was releasing this with the release of the 3rd season of Ted Lasso, because we thought that's a good moment to get traction and eyeballs on our database. Like, people would get interested and excited about Ted Lasso if we launch it at the right time. So we had a soft deadline, which, to be honest with you, when we started working on the project, we didn't even know when the third season was going to be released. So that was, it was a bit of an unknown in this. However, I think like what is important is to have something, like have like a deadline, or have a conversation with the person you're collaborating with on the deadline, because you need to be honest about like what you want the most from this project. Are you, for instance, flexible? Do you have a hard stop? What's happening in your personal life that maybe like you have like weeks or months where you can't dedicate so much time to the personal project? What does that mean? Does that mean that you pause? Does that mean that you accelerate the project to fit in the deadline? These are things that you need to discuss with whoever you're working with on a personal project. Moving on, like from the process to a detailed exploration of each of the steps. As I said, like our collaboration, like finding the ideas, it was very fast. Like I think like we started like discussing it, and then like getting like ideas about like the subtopics very quickly. And this collaboration just started with a Zoom call during which like we discussed this. But then that's when the real work started. And that's what Sarah is going to walk you through with the data collection.
It would help if I unmuted my microphone. Thank you, Anne-Sophie. Okay, great. So as Anne-Sophie mentioned, we needed to come up with a data set. And we started looking around and we found a few articles that referenced Ted Lasso pop culture references. And we also checked a resource called IMDb Connections Pages, which is something that Anne-Sophie has used for some of her other visualizations. But we were not finding a comprehensive list of all the pop culture references. And so we decided to rewatch seasons 1 and season 2 and manually collect the data, which was a ton of fun. It was great. And in fact, rewatching the episodes gave us a chance to capture some pop culture references that we missed the first time round. There was a lot of pause and rewind as we scribbled down the references, but we essentially started off with a very basic spreadsheet: the season, the episode number, what the reference was, and who said it. And we just tried to capture as many of them as we could. And then we decided it was time to start expanding out our data set and building the metadata. And so this is when we gave each reference a reference number. We started categorizing the references by the type that it was. Was it a sports reference? Was it a movie reference? Where did the reference come from? The country of origin. So we started gathering a lot of the what about the references. And then we also started looking at the context and the significance of each reference, the why it mattered. And so we relied heavily on Wikipedia for that. We also found a transcript website so that we could get the actual quote, the actual dialogue correct. Accuracy was important to us here. And so as you can see, we went from a very basic spreadsheet to a very like a blown up data set that gave us a very rich data source to work with. And part of this process involved data cleaning. We really had to agree on a standardized format for how we were doing this, because we were sharing this work. I believe I was season 1 and Anne-Sophie was season 2. And so we on that I would write, I would say Ted, Coach Beard, and Anne-Sophie was adding an and in there. And so we needed to make sure that we were using consistent language and consistent formatting. And so through this process, we came up with a standardized, a data set that was formatted in a standardized way. And it also gave us the opportunity to really nail down our criteria for our references. And this is the point in the process when we agreed upon the fact that we were going to only include pop culture references that was part of Ted's dialogue, because the show has a lot of references that were maybe a poster on the office wall or a book that Coach Beard was holding. And so we decided to exclude those. Those might make another beautiful viz, but for us, we really wanted to detail what do these pop culture references tell us about Ted Lasso's character. And so we were able to, through the building out the metadata and the cleaning of the data, nail down that specific criteria. And through that process, we came up with 200 references. Now, while we were doing this, some insights jumped out to us right away. For example, we realized that there were very few duplicate references. And in fact, over 90% of the references were a unique pop culture reference. We also realized early on that by categorizing them by cinema, music, sports, that in fact, very few of them were sports related, which we found very surprising. So a lot of these early insights really helped inform our call outs for the viz. So we were already starting to realize some insights as we were going through that, as we were building our data source and cleaning it. We also wanted to incorporate the Ted Lasso brand into our visualization, and we wanted to keep our viz very playful and fun, just like the Ted Lasso brand is. And so one of the ideas we had early on was, how could we take the opening sequence of the show where Ted Lasso sits down in the empty stadium, and when he sits down, the seats turn from blue to red. So right away, there was a light bulb moment, and Anne-Sophie and I said, let's make each reference one seat, and let's find a seat icon using the Noun project that we could use in our data visualization. So that's one way that we incorporated the Ted Lasso brand into our design. We also did a lot of sketching, and we would send images back and forth to each other. And, early on, we had the idea of how can we incorporate the yellow Believe poster into our design. And it didn't come naturally at first. And in fact, the yellow poster wasn't really truthfully added to the design until very near the end of our development. But this just shows you some ideas of how we were able to share back and forth. And there was a lot of doodling happening in those early stages. So we knew that we were going to work with a seat, as one seat equals one pop culture reference. And so we started building and exploring with some different chart types. So naturally, we started with a trellis because we wanted it to look like the stadium. But the seats were really small and there was a lot of white space. So then we said, well, let's try no trellis and see what that looks like. And we'll just apply a calculation on the color to give us the red and blue, but not quite what we were looking for. And so then we tried sets. Maybe we'll say the color red is in and the color blue is out. But again, a lot of gaps and didn't really give us the feeling of being that stadium. And so for a brief moment, we actually abandoned the seat idea and we said, maybe we need to make it try to look like a soccer field, like a green soccer field with lines on it. But that just was not the ticket. So we scratched that idea pretty quickly and went right back to our seats. And part of the challenge to building an exceptional dashboard is balancing that creative storytelling with the technical aspects of Tableau. And we really challenged ourselves to tell the story of Ted Lasso's character in a creative way, while simultaneously leveraging Tableau's technical capabilities. So Anne-Sophie, if you could go to the next slide, please. I'd like to share now our first attempt was a long portrait dashboard. And this was a good first attempt, but it didn't quite match our vision for great work technically. And it didn't really satisfy what we were trying to do in terms of storytelling. So from this, we actually went to a version that was, in fact, 4 dashboards that used navigation buttons. And this was an improvement on the storytelling aspect, but it was really clunky and performance was compromised. So we knew this wasn't quite the one that we wanted. And so ultimately, we landed on what ended up being our final version, which is in fact one dashboard that uses 10 background images and parameter actions with custom buttons to switch both the images and the charts that you see there. And so I'd like to just take a moment to show you the technique that we use to do this. I'm going to be very top line. I won't get too technical, but if at any point somebody would like to replicate this technique and you're having trouble, I'd be more than happy to jump on a working session with you and help you troubleshoot it. It was a technique that Will Sutton has written about, and we can share with you his post regarding it. But Anne-Sophie, if you could go to the next slide, please. The way to do this is create your images. So we had 10 images, and we clearly labeled them 1 through 10. And then you will need a separate data source that has a slide dimension with those values 1 through 10 in it. And lastly, you will also need to generate a parameter that references this slide dimension. So once you have those 3 components, you can then start building. So you're going to need a calculation that uses that slide dimension and the parameter. And you put that, I named it filter, onto my filter shelf. You also need to add your slide dimension to your pages shelf. And then you're going to build a scatter plot, which is ultimately a blank scatter plot on a sheet. And we just use ad hoc calculations for that. We fit the axes to be fixed. And then we uncheck the show header. So essentially we had a blank sheet. Next, you're going to access the Maps menu. And there's a background images selection there. When you click on that, you select the data source that you want to reference. And that opens up a dialog box. And in this dialog box, this is where you add your images. And you'll see that the images are connected to those slide index numbers. So once you have that in place, you then have a sheet that has all of your images on it. And you want to take this sheet and add it to your dashboard as a floating object. And you will set the placement so that X is 0 and Y is 0. And the sheet, that floating sheet, is the same size as your dashboard. And you will use a parameter action to change the images. Next, you take a floating container and put that in front of your background images. And that container is what will hold your sheets that have your charts. So the charts are ultimately in a floating container in front of your floating sheet that has your background images. And the same parameter action will advance both the background images and your charts. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Anne-Sophie so that she can talk a little bit about how we animated the seats.
Thank you, Sarah. As you can see, Sarah is a lot more comfortable than I am on any technical aspect of this viz. But I really love the way that she implemented this technique. I just want to talk to you about one little aspect of this viz, which is the location of the seats. As Sarah showed you, we tried trellis, we tried sets, we tried different things. And the long story short is that the seats, the way that they move, the animation, you saw, it's inspired by the opening sequence, but we didn't just needed the seats to change color. We also needed them to change position depending on the criteria that we were analyzing. So if the first data point was show me the references by season, all the data points needed to be shown by season, as we're going to see just now. Just that's it. And then we want to move to by country, so the seats need to move by country, then sorting out by type of reference, etc., etc. And this technique about how to basically locate the seats and make them move was inspired by a viz from Simon Rowe. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And he did a viz about the Titanic a couple of years ago. And I remember when I saw this viz, I was just, I need to find a project where I can replicate that technique, because this is absolutely awesome. Each dot represents, in his viz, each dot represents a person which was on board of the Titanic, and then, did they survive or were they lost at sea? And then he drills down into demographics such as whether first class, second class, third class, whether women or women, whether staff on the Titanic, or were there a passenger, etc., etc. And but you have this same thing of reshuffling the viz depending on the point that he's trying to make. To get back to the location of the seats of the Ted Lasso viz, I am going to be honest, I cannot do any better explanation than the explanation that Simon did on his Titanic viz. So if you go on his profile on the Titanic visualization, he actually links to the blog post, which is a tutorial where he explains the technique, especially getting the X and Y for each of the data points that you want to focus on. And for me, like the biggest takeaway is actually, it's a double takeaway. The first one is, if you create something innovative in Tableau, you'd better document it somewhere on a blog post or something, because somebody like me, for instance, will come and ask you like, hey, how did you manage this awesome viz? That's the first key takeaway. The second takeaway is, if you're on the other side of the equation and you have a question for somebody about how they achieved the viz, I'm going to be honest, like, everyone in the data farm is so nice and have been so helpful. You know, a lot of the vizes are like, you can download them in Tableau, so you can actually go and scrutinize what's happening in terms of calculations, etc. But a lot of people also helped us, like, and they were very patient and kind and gave us feedback or gave us like more explanation. I think, to be honest, in this specific case, like the tutorial was clear enough, like it was all good for me to get started. The long story short is that the placement of the seats was an extremely manual and time-consuming process, but I would not necessarily redo for any viz. In this specific case, it was the technique that we needed to do to get to the results we wanted. And we, as Sarah showed you, we explored different visualization. Like the idea of the seats moving was something that was very essential for us in this viz. So I think it was worth spending the time of creating both X and Y's, even if it was a bit of a manual process. And I'm sure there could have been a better way to do it, but there we go. I also want to talk a bit about the background images. So as Sarah explained, like the background images move, but I want to also maybe explain like how they were done. All the charts were obviously done in Tableau. All the background images were done in Figma. We also added like non-project icons. So if you can afford, a paid license is a great investment, I have to say, because I think I've played with loads of icons during this process and loads of ideas of background visuals. What can I tell you about Figma? I think like it allows more custom fonts than in Tableau. So this is why this is very interesting. We wanted a font that looked like the font of the poster, again, to stay in the look and feel of Ted Lasso. It allows great flexibility in terms of design. It allows us to replicate like the background images quickly and just like move the elements that we needed. And then like the way that but I wanted to show you like separately what is done in Figma, which is done in Tableau, so that you get a sense, but also how it gets like when it gets together, that's when like that's the final project, that's the final result, that's what you see. But actually, you know, you're working with two very different things, and then it's when they merge that they actually look like you know, really finished project. Key takeaway on working with Figma for background images in Tableau. I think my main learning is that if you want to learn Figma for Tableau projects, don't just do a Figma course, which is generic. Just maybe watch more tutorials made by the data farm about how to use Figma for Tableau, because you will probably learn like more like what you need to get started. So I will, once I've stopped sharing my screen, I will share some video links. There was one by Gafar Shah and one with Autumn Datani and Lizzie Bitzendal, which were like essential for me to get started on Figma. And then the final point that we want to talk when we talk about design, interactivity, and how we've published this viz is that this is a viz which has a general audience in mind. So we wanted to do this viz for anyone who has watched Ted Lasso and have noticed that his dialogues are quirky and wanted to maybe explore a bit more, especially while they were waiting for the launch of the third season. So if you think about this audience, like so people who have watched Ted Lasso, most people like, and the fact that we share on social media, we can probably guess that half our incoming visitors are going to discover this piece on their cell phones. And it would have been challenging for us to have this viz being accessible as it is, as we showed you so far on mobile. That doesn't really work. Like you need a bigger screen to be able to explore, to click everywhere, etc. So what we've done is we did add a mobile version to this viz. So when you're on Tableau, you can decide if you just have like a desktop, and you can also add a mobile layout. But what we did is that our mobile layout is a bit different. The first thing is that the text is much shorter. It's the same visual identity. Sorry, I should have started with this. It's the same colors, it's the same fonts, etc. But it's much shorter text. There's a lot of space. Like we made sure that the font size works for mobile. So it's more of an appetizer. It's more like, hey, by the way, this looks much better if you're on your desktop. But just so you know, this is what this is about. So come and check it out when you're on your desktop. But also we provided one specific element, a little interactive tool, which is actually only available in mobile, where you can actually, there's a, how do you call that? A drop-down menu where you can select one specific reference, and then it will give you like the summary, not all the details which are available on desktop, but some of the details. And the key takeaway of us presenting this design for mobile part is that if you're building a business dashboard, or if you are building for the data farm, maybe it's okay not to consider mobile and your mobile audience. But if you're building this on a passion project, and that your audience is the general public, especially if you're sharing on social media, I think it might be worth considering either adapting completely your viz for mobile, or at least providing just a sneak peek, like a teaser, explaining to people what this work is all about, and encouraging them to bookmark and read it later. If you have any question about the technical aspect of the viz, please talk to Sarah. I'm joking. But what I mean is that you can always download the viz to get started, to be able to play with the workbook, etc. We're more than happy to answer any questions about all the techniques. Sarah just told you only 20% of all the great techniques that she used to make this viz as beautiful as possible. There were loads of hiding boxes, dynamic, really a lot of interactivity involved in this. So really a lot of great tips. But feel free also to just play with the viz, download it and play with it. Also, the reason why we wanted to do this talk today with you is because maybe you are excited and or maybe you want to you're excited and you're just okay, me too, I want to collaborate on a passion project. Or maybe you're shy and you don't even know where to get started. So if you don't know where to find somebody, maybe drop a comment today in today's chat. Or maybe you can follow the hashtag #VizCollab. I also will drop a link to Nicole Klassen's blog post where she talks about the project and how it works. But that's how we got matched, Sarah and I, and that was the beginning of a beautiful adventure for the two of us. I'm going to let Sarah take us home with the final takeaways on this project.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. And I just need to give you a shout out because all of that beautiful work that you did in Figma really elevated the viz. So I appreciate you so much. We just wanted to conclude with a few lessons learned. We've touched on them throughout the talk, but really the first thing as you go into a collaboration is you both need to know why you want to do this. And so for me, it was I wanted to grow my skill set. I really wanted to push my learning in data visualization, excuse me, and specifically Tableau. One moment, please.
It's the emotion.
I'm getting all choked up over here.
Oh,
I love connecting with the Data Fam, and this Viz Collab was such a beautiful way to do that, because we also reached out to Viz office hours and shared the Viz as in the design process to really get feedback. And, you know, we also realized that we need to be flexible. And, you know, there was a lot of, we had to be okay with letting go of some good ideas when a better idea came along, you know, and there was a lot of back and forth on some of those things. And we had to agree on the goal that we had in mind. And last but not least, you need to continue collaborating after you press the publish button. So back in March, when we published, we coordinated the day and time that we were both going to put it on our Tableau public profile. And then one of the delightful bonuses was we could then also coordinate the timing of the social media posts, and we could lift each other up. We could really celebrate each other's work and our contributions to this project. And you know, sometimes self-promotion can feel really cringy, but when you've got a collaborator and you can help promote each other, it really lifts that and makes it feel lighter and so much more joyful. And so those were some of the lessons that we learned in this process. And on that note, we wanted to close our talk with a quote from season 2, episode 1, and I'll share it with you here. It is, "I think things come into our lives to help us get from one place to a better one." And indeed, that was the case here. I'm so thankful that Anne-Sophie came into my life and took me from one place to a better one.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was, I don't know what to say after that. I'm going to be shocked too. But you can follow us on Tableau Public, the two of us, like for... Yeah, I'm going to...
Don't worry, it's not finished. We have some questions for you after that. But you managed to make me almost cry. Huh? I was quite emotional.
That's a Ted Lasso effect.
Indeed.
Thank you so much. If we could virtually clap, that would be the moment. Thank you so much. And I think the audience really liked it. We never had so many questions from the start. So you're not yet released. There are many questions to answer. And please, if you still would like to answer more questions, add them to the Q&A. There's still time. All right. So I'll just start off with asking the questions, if that is okay for you.
Yes.
So Alison asked about how do you deal with language barriers when collaborating? And I think she adds later on, it's less about the cultural differences and more so the use of English.
I made Sarah speak in French to me.
Well, thankfully, growing up in Canada, I did learn a little bit of French, and so that helped. That helped a little bit. But I have to say, I think it made the project. It added to the richness of the project, because there were cultural references that Anne-Sophie picked up on that I missed, and the other way around. And then when we were building out our metadata and looking at the significance of it, there were a couple that we had to help each other understand, like, why is that significant? And is it significant? And that sort of thing. So, yeah, but in terms of the language barrier, Anne-Sophie was happy to work in English for me, so.
Yeah, I've been living in London for 10 years. So I just, I have to say, yeah, it is a thing, not being a native English speaker. It is, I am like, you know, I'm very happy. Like Sarah was very kind and patient, but she was definitely a much better copywriter than I was. I was just like, oh, she makes everything sound so flawlessly and so natural. And I was just like, I can't even, like, you know, I would give her like, oh, this is an idea, like, you know, subject like verb complement, and she would turn it into something. I was just like, that's amazing. So that also played in you realize how good a copy can be when you work with somebody who is very talented at finding the right word, the word poetry in the words. And so that's another thing. Like, I didn't think like, oh, I'm going to collaborate with Sarah because of that. But actually, I was just like, I really appreciate what you're doing right now, because she made it sound like effortless. It was not. Trust me, it was not.
And one of the benefits of collaborating, when you're in sync like that, it really allows one person's strengths to complement the other person's strengths, and it just really, lifts up the team in that way. So that was a really beautiful aspect of this project.
Yeah. And Faith, I see that you have a question more about like the difference between some country specific references. I gotta be honest that at first, like anytime Ted would do a dialogue and it was a bit obscure, I would write it down, be like, is it a reference or is it not? And then I would like Google to death, or until I was sure that it was or was not. There was one about Isaac Newton, which we both did not understand, and we just excluded it because we can't even understand if it was like we really don't know. So we just like, well, if we can't explain it and neither read it or anything can explain it, then I guess it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so you just responded to Faith's question. Annabelle also added a question about if you had some reactions from the actor or the director of the show.
Not yet. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because I went to see Brett Goldstein, who plays Roy Kent, and I went to see Nate. No, sorry, I know his name is not Nate. The actor that plays Nate. They do comedy gigs here in the UK. Yeah, very different style than Ted Lasso, I just want to point out. But I didn't wait backstage to show them the visualization. But maybe I should.
Maybe you can ping him in Twitter or something like that. Sometimes it works. Just they like it.
Oh, Annabelle, you don't think I tried?
You can try again.
You should send him the recording of this talk.
There we go. Perfect.
All right. Then Scott asks, what were some of the interesting insights you found from the analysis of the references?
Well, a lot of the insights came from, and Anne-Sophie, correct me if I'm wrong, but off the top of my head, we estimated Ted Lasso's age, and we figured out that most of the references came from his teenager and early 20s. So his youth. So he was nostalgic and in a lot of his references in terms of TVs and movies and music in particular.
No, but there was a better one, Sarah. And I'm going to have to call you out, because you found something which was so funny, is that there's 5 years in which, like, there's 5 years in the 2000s where Ted Lasso doesn't make any reference, and you notice that it's because he became a parent. So he basically didn't have time for TV or movies anymore. And I thought it was hilarious that, there was just that time where he was probably too sleep deprived to actually access pop culture or even watch sports or whatever. And I thought that was really, really sweet.
That's right. I forgot about that one. Yeah, there's a lot of truth behind that. If there's any parents on this call.
I think for me there was something about there was something about the way he addresses people. Like, he doesn't talk like highbrow culture to the people that probably have gone to private school, etc. And he doesn't talk down to the footballers as like, oh, you're athletes, like you don't have time to read books, or or you're not interested in musicals or stuff like that. He doesn't have that, and I think it's there's intention in that, in the fact that he is somebody who will talk to everyone the same way and has a massive breadth of culture, and is not like afraid of appearing too girly or too this or too that. Like, it doesn't care about that. And I think that's something. It tells about the beautiful quality of the way the character is written.
Mm-hmm. The character development comes through with all those pop culture references, and the show is just so cleverly written. Hats off to the writers of the show.
All right, thank you so much. Also, another question. You touched upon that a bit, but basically, what is the one thing that you would do differently for next collaboration?
Oh. That's a tough one.
I'm gonna be honest. I think this one took a long. Like, I've never worked on a project that took me so long. I don't know for you, Sarah, but like as a passion project, that is quite long. But it was, I think the longest I've taken was 3 months for a personal project. But this one also, we created the data set. Like, it took us like extreme, like it's really a labor of love. And then the design and interactive. I remember saying to Sarah, like, it was not like how do you call that, a break or make. No, what do you call that? No, it's not the expression I'm looking for. It was not like a requirement, but I said to Sarah, we're gonna make this of the day with this one. That's my goal. Like, that's where we're going. Like, I'm not like, we are not doing anything less of a quality than the viz of the day. That's the type of quality. And Sarah was also extremely, she wanted to do a great work. I think we got lucky with that. So I wouldn't do anything differently in terms of, but I would say this: you need to agree with the person. If you're collaborating to do something quick, just so that you can make it, it's absolutely fine. If you want to do something which is stellar work, and it takes 10 months, it's absolutely fine. If you don't, but it really needs to be something you agree, because especially on a passion project, like, there is nothing that ties you with this person. But I'm so glad we completed it. So
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure this was very articulate.
And I think that's excellent. I think, when you start out, you do kind of have to prioritize, you have to share where priorities are. And, we both agreed we wanted to do great work. And we were thankful that the season 3 premiere got delayed, which maybe it was a blessing and a curse. It gave us more time because the data collection and cleaning took longer than we were expecting. But it also gave us that bandwidth that we needed so we could be flexible with each other. Because, as Anne-Sophie said, is passion project, we were doing this, I was doing this after the kids were asleep and on the weekends and outside of my day job, right? as was Anne-Sophie. So you have to make time for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that also is the last question I can see in the Q&A. Can you give an estimate on how many hours each of you invested in the project?
I'm so sorry. I feel I'm not the fastest learner. I'm not the most efficient Tableau user. So I think if I give a number, I don't want to. On my side, personally, I can't tell you, because I know that, for instance, we didn't work on this project 10 months every day, by the way. We did that, like, we had moments, we had pause. I think, like, I stopped for a month because there was INVs and I wanted to enter something. We had holidays, like, we had parents' visits, etc. So it's not like we worked on this for 10 months, like, straight up. But I think we spend a lot of time learning techniques.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Yeah.
So the follow-up question was, how many hours approximately per week? Like, even if it's not constantly each week, but was it more like, 1 hour per week, or more like 20 hours?
It definitely fluctuated. I mean, we had our weekly Zoom calls and we were pretty good. I mean, there was occasionally we would need to cancel those for scheduling reasons or whatnot, but those were usually half an hour a week. And then, I was doing this outside of, so I was doing this in the evenings on the weekends. So, there were a lot of weeks where it was like 4 hours on the weekend, or 6 hours, or maybe an evening session for a couple of hours after work. that kind of thing. It definitely fluctuated. There were some weeks where it was more and some weeks where it was less. But it is a significant amount of time for sure.
All right. Thank you so much. I don't see any additional questions anymore. This is the last chance to put in your last question. If not, I think I can speak also for Annabelle. Thank you so much. I hope the audience liked it. We liked it. And yeah, I hope to see much more talks coming up in the Data Plus Women and Zurich events about more dataviz collaborations now that we've learned the best practices from you. But yeah, Annabelle?
I'm trying to convince Olivia for years to do a collaboration with me for years, and I had to invite you guys today in order to try to convince her. That was a message, a subliminal message for her.
It is so worth it. I am here to tell you, it is so worth it.
No, but thank you very much. We hope to come back soon with new speakers. If you want to speak, please let us know. And otherwise, we wish you a beautiful end of the day, morning, evening, or whatever. Thank you very much.